The hospital room greeted Alex with silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the machine monitoring his pulse. As soon as he regained consciousness, he felt weakness spreading through his body, as if he had been wrung out like a rag. He tried to move his fingers, but his arms and legs felt like they belonged to someone else, immobile, cold, foreign. The only proof that he was still alive was his mind, clinging to each thought like a lifeline. Alex opened his eyes, but the hospital lights painfully pierced them. Everything before him was blurred. The walls, the window, even the metal stand with the transparent IV drip looked indistinct, as if he were peering through frosted glass. His head was spinning, but memories began to return. The last thing Alex remembered was his old tractor stalling on the road. He walked home, savoring the scent of the night air. And then, emptiness. Voices suddenly came to life in the corridor beyond the door. Alex tensed. The calm and cold female voice belonged to Marina. There was always a hint of irritation in her voice. But now the tone was particularly harsh, almost unfamiliar. "I'm telling you, he won't wake up again," she said, lowering her voice, yet the words echoed in the silence. "He's lying there like a vegetable. The doctor said it's hopeless." Alex froze, listening, not believing his ears. She was talking about him. How could she discuss her husband's fate so calmly, a man she'd spent years with? His temples throbbed, and cold sweat beaded on his forehead. "Yes," Marina continued, "the documents are almost ready. We'll sell the house and the land as soon as everything is finalized. Don't worry, I'll take care of it." "And his mother? She has no say here. It's my right." Her voice faded. For a moment there was ringing silence. Alex wanted to scream, but his throat felt constricted by an invisible noose. He just lay there rigidly, staring at the ceiling and listening as his world crumbled. "You're too nervous," Marina's voice came again, now softer, almost tender. "Everything will be fine. We both deserve this. He would have died anyway, you understand. Only he would have suffered. This way, it will end quickly." His wife's words burned more than the pain in his body. Alex, who was used to trusting people, relying on those around him, felt this trust slip away, like sand between his fingers. Marina, his wife, the one for whom he had moved mountains to build a farm and a home, the one who had smiled at him over a cup of tea at dawn and promised to always be with him. Now her voice sounded like a stranger's, indifferent and devoid of soul. He heard her footsteps approaching the room door. Alex closed his eyes so as not to reveal himself. Marina entered quietly like a cat and stopped by the bed. She stood there for a few seconds, peering into his face. Her perfume, once gentle and pleasant to him, now carried a bitter sweetness, like the scent of withered flowers. "Don't drag it out," she whispered as if to herself. "Just go, Alex. You're of no use to me anymore." Those words were the last straw. He would have liked to get up, throw accusations at her, rip off that mask of pretense, but he could only lie there in silence. Her footsteps retreated, and Alex heard her speaking to someone in the corridor again. "We'll succeed. The main thing is to wait for the paperwork. We'll sell this damn house right away, and I can finally start a normal life." Alex clenched his fists. Despite the pain that seized his entire body, he no longer felt helpless. Those words, that cold, inhuman part of her, had no place in his life. He would survive for himself, for the house, for the farm, for everything he had built with his own hands, even if he had to start all over again. He would pull through. In that moment, Alex vowed to himself he would reclaim his life, and no one, not even Marina, would stand in his way. Time in the hospital room seemed to stand still. Days turned into nights, and then morning came again. But it seemed as if he lay there motionless like a mummy, hearing snatches of conversations and feeling life slowly, by millimeters, return to his body. Marina's words kept surfacing in his mind. He won't wake up. Vegetable. Useless. These phrases gnawed at his memory, leaving no room for sleep or peace. The doctor, who checked his condition daily, mentioned a couple of times that his chances were good. But chances for what? To stand up and find out that everything he lived for had been sold, destroyed. No. Such an outcome was unacceptable to him. He wouldn't allow his house, his land, or his dignity to be ruined. When a nurse came to change his IV one morning, Alex decided to try speaking. Just yesterday he had managed to slightly move his fingers, and that gave him hope. Gathering all his strength, he made a croaky sound, more like a cough. The woman looked at him in surprise, froze. "What did you say?" Her voice was gentle, but with a hint of caution. He tried to repeat. The words felt like sharp stones stuck in his throat. "Don't call her," he whispered, straining every facial muscle. The nurse frowned, but nodded. She seemed to understand who he was referring to. "All right," she replied, gently adjusting the pillow under his head. "But you need more rest." After that it became a little quieter in his room. None of the staff mentioned Marina again or asked if she should be informed about her husband's condition. Apparently the nurse had taken the hint and decided to help. On the third day after this conversation, the doctor came to see him. His name was Mark Smith, a middle-aged man with a kind but tired face, the sort of person who wouldn't say anything unnecessary, but wouldn't hide the truth either. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I can talk." The reply was quieter than Alex would have liked, yet the words formed easily. The doctor looked at the patient with surprise. "That's an excellent sign. The recovery is progressing faster than we expected." Alex didn't want to discuss health. "Doctor, if I want to leave here, how soon will that be possible?" Mark Smith looked at him intently, as if trying to read between the lines. "It's too soon for you. However, if your condition improves, it might be possible in a week or two. But why are you in such a hurry?" Alex didn't have a chance to reply. A knock on the door interrupted them. The doctor rose, nodded, and opened the door. Marina. She looked like she'd just stepped off a magazine cover. Her makeup was flawless, and her hair was neatly styled, but there wasn't a hint of warmth in her eyes. "May I come in?" she asked, glancing at her husband. However, her voice sounded like she was talking about a stranger. "Yes, of course," the doctor answered, letting her in. Marina approached the bed without a smile. Alex watched her closely, noting the details, her hands with manicured nails, a new necklace around her neck that he hadn't seen before. A shadow of irritation flickered in her eyes when she noticed he was observing her. "How are you, darling?" she said in such a flat tone that it sounded more like a routine question. He didn't reply, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. It was their first meeting after her words in the corridor, and Alex couldn't bring himself to even say her name. "The doctor said you have a chance to recover," she continued, not waiting for a response. "I knew you were strong. Just don't strain yourself, okay? You need to conserve your strength right now." Her voice was soft, but behind this softness hid indifference, maybe even hatred. Alex saw through her. Marina had always been good at pretending, and she had honed this talent too well. When she left, leaving behind only a trail of perfume, Alex closed his eyes. A plan was already forming in his mind. He wouldn't let her destroy his life. If she decided to get rid of him, let her think she'd succeeded. But his return would be a real surprise for her. Soon, the man asked the doctor to help him contact someone. The doctor hesitated for a long time, but eventually agreed. A few hours later, Tom Harris, a childhood friend, appeared in the room. "You look good, Alex," he muttered, sitting in a chair by the bed. "Tom, I need your help." Alex's voice was weak but determined. Tom leaned closer and Alex whispered his plan. The night in the room was unusually quiet. Even the monotonous beeping of the machine seemed like a distant background. Alex lay with his eyes closed, listening to the whisper of his own thoughts. He replayed them in his mind over and over, considering every detail. Everything had to go smoothly. Any mistake could turn into a catastrophe. 3 days later, the doctor, satisfied with the patient's improvement, reluctantly agreed to his discharge against medical advice. Tom had prepared everything and took Alex to his old house on the outskirts, where he could recover quietly, hidden from prying eyes. Marina was convinced he was still in the hospital, half asleep, unable to speak or move. "Do you think this will work?" Tom asked, throwing a log into the fireplace. The flames danced merrily, lighting up the simple wooden room. "It will," Alex replied firmly, sitting on the old couch. His face remained stern, but determination shone in his eyes. "She always underestimated me. Thinks I'm a vegetable. I'll show her what kind of vegetable I am." Meanwhile, Marina felt quite satisfied. Her visits to the hospital became less frequent. Each time she played the caring wife just to maintain appearances for the doctors. She didn't know that another patient now occupied Alex's room, and no one was watching her husband anymore. That same evening, she hosted guests. Steve, her lover, had brought several bottles of wine. They sat around the table in the living room, celebrating their success. "Everything is going smoothly," Marina said, raising her glass. "As soon as the papers are ready, we'll leave here. I'm so sick of this damn house." "He wouldn't have left me anything just like that," she continued. "I had to take matters into my own hands. What if he wakes up?" Steve said it more as a joke, but his eyes became briefly anxious. Marina laughed, leaning back in her chair. "Wake up? You heard the doctors. It's impossible. He's long been unable to talk or move." At that moment, the door to the house quietly opened. Alex stood in the shadows, observing what was happening. He saw Marina mocking. Her laughter sounded cold and foreign. She held a glass in her hand, and in front of her was a dish of expensive delicacies. The house he had built with his own hands had now become just a backdrop for the next stage of her plan. For a moment, anger swept over him like a storm. He wanted to burst into the room and unleash all his accumulated fury on her. But he held himself back. He needed to act coolly. This was his house, and he needed to reclaim it with dignity. Alex stepped inside, slamming the door loudly. The sound echoed through the house. Marina turned and paled. "You," her voice faltered, as if she had seen a ghost. "What? Didn't expect?" he asked calmly, taking a step forward. His tall figure and stern face made her involuntarily step back. Steve stood up, trying to maintain an appearance of confidence, but his hands betrayed him, shaking. "This is some kind of joke," Marina muttered, not taking her eyes off Alex. "No, Marina," he replied quietly. "I'm here. And you know what's funny? I heard everything. Heard you talking about selling the house, planning to get rid of me. All this time you were here not for me, but for yourself." "You misunderstood," she tried to justify herself, but her voice wavered. Alex slowly walked to the table where the half-drunk glasses stood. He picked one up, inspected it closely, then poured the wine onto the floor. "Get out," he said in an icy tone. "You have 5 minutes to pack your things and disappear from my house. If you're still here in 5 minutes, I'll call the police." "You can't do this to me," Marina screamed, her face contorted with rage. "It's my house too. We're married." "We're married," he cut her off. "Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce. Now go." Marina tried to say something else, but Alex raised his hand, making her fall silent. She grabbed her bag, nearly dropping it, and rushed out the door. Steve, not waiting for an invitation, hurried after her. When the door closed, Alex was left alone in the silence. He walked to the window and looked out. There was no joy nor anger in his soul, only fatigue. The house became quiet again. Alex stood by the window, watching Marina and her lover get into the car. Headlights illuminated the dusty road, and in a moment they disappeared around the bend. The man took a deep breath, trying to dispel the anger and pain still swirling inside him. The silence in the house no longer seemed peaceful. It was ringing, oppressive. The scent of betrayal hovered in the air. Alex walked into the living room. The table bore glasses with half-drunk wine, crumpled napkins, and scattered cookies. It all looked like a scene from someone else's life. He sat in the old armchair, running his hand over the cracked leather. "So, you kicked them out?" Tom asked, sitting across from him. Alex nodded, but instead of relief, his eyes held only emptiness. "Gone," he answered curtly. "Took her buddy and left." "Good job, Alex." Tom patted him on the shoulder. "Now things will get better. Just don't dwell on the past." "And I'm not planning to," Alex replied hoarsely, rubbing his face with his hands. "I just can't understand how it came to this. Together, Tom, I did everything for her, for us, and she was just waiting for me to fall." Tom didn't know what to say. He had known Alex since childhood and understood how devoted he was to his work, his home, and the people around him. For Alex, family was sacred, and this betrayal was a blow that wouldn't be easily overcome. "You need to turn the page," Tom finally said. "Your home, your farm, everything else is trash. Throw it out of your mind." Alex silently got up and started clearing the table. He needed to keep himself busy to avoid being swallowed by his thoughts. The wine was poured down the sink. Dirty dishes were stacked in the sink. Each gesture was precise, mechanical, as if he were trying to remove not just the dirt, but everything that reminded him of Marina. The next morning, Alex stepped onto the porch. The day was sunny. A cool breeze carried the scent of cut grass. He looked around the yard. Every tree, every path. This was his home, and now it belonged only to him. But that thought alone was not enough. He needed something else, something real that would help him feel alive again. On the horizon, Alex noticed a figure. It was Nancy, a neighbor who had always helped in difficult times. She was carrying a basket of apples and waving to him. "Hello," the woman called. "I decided to drop by and check on you." "Nancy," he smiled for the first time in a long while. "Come on over. I'm here by myself. Soon I'll start talking to the dogs." She laughed and climbed onto the porch. "I brought apples, fresh ones. I heard you were back and thought you might need some company." "Thanks," he said, taking the basket. "Come inside. I'll put the kettle on." She entered the house, and her gaze immediately fell on the spot where Marina and her lover had celebrated their triumph. Alex noticed her hesitation. "Don't worry, it's just temporary mess," he said calmly. "There was a little hurricane." She smirked. "It happens. The important thing is that it's over now." They talked for a long time at the kitchen table. Nancy spoke about her garden, about her plans to plant new trees in the fall. Alex listened, feeling the tension gradually leave him. The neighbor's voice was quiet, soothing, as though she were lulling him. Alex realized he hadn't thought about Marina for several hours. "If you need any help," Nancy said, standing up, "just let me know. I'm always near." She left, leaving behind a light scent of apples and a warm smile. Alex watched her go, feeling something new budding within him. Hope, calmness. Perhaps it was just a moment of peace, but it was already priceless. Autumn took its toll. Golden leaves rustled underfoot. The wind played with the branches of the trees, and the sky, washed with watercolor, became deeper and colder. Alex stood at the farm fence, leaning on its sturdy wooden beams, and looked into the distance. The fields, which he once cultivated, were coming to life. The land was his support, his refuge. In this peace, he found true meaning. The house no longer reminded him of a place where lies had recently reigned. Everything that reminded him of Marina had disappeared. Her things, expensive trinkets, even the scent of her perfume. Alex had donated it all to a charity, deciding once and for all to erase her from his life. Work helped him deal with the heaviness of his thoughts. From dawn to dusk he labored on the farm, working the land, fixing fences. But that wasn't all that filled his days. Nancy, as promised, often came to help. She would bring fresh bread, jam, or sometimes just sit beside him to chat about little things that turned out to mean a lot. One evening, as the sun was dipping behind the horizon, Alex sat on the porch with a cup of hot tea in his hands. He watched the garden where Nancy and his dog were gathering fallen apples. Her figure, lit by the soft sunset glow, seemed to be part of this place, as though she had always been here. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, climbing onto the porch with the basket in her hands. "About how everything could have been different," he replied honestly. "If it weren't for those events, I probably never would have understood what real life is." "Sometimes what breaks us gives a chance to build something new," Nancy said, sitting beside him. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a confidence that was comforting. Alex looked at her and smiled. She was right. Everything he had gone through had led him here, to this house, to this moment, and perhaps to her. Months passed. Snow fell on the roofs and covered the fields with a white carpet. Alex stood at the window, watching Nancy wrapped in a scarf, helping him feed the chickens. She laughed as the birds flocked to her, looking as if she were part of this winter scene. His life had changed. It was no longer burdened by lies or unnecessary ambitions. Everything he needed was here: work, land, people he could trust. Alex felt free, and with this freedom came happiness. One evening, sitting at the table with Nancy, he looked at her and said, "You know, I thought I'd lost everything, but now I realize it was just a pause. Everything important is just beginning." Nancy smiled and placed her hand on his. "You're right. Sometimes the end is just the beginning." That night, Alex slept peacefully for the first time in a long while. His home, his land, his life, everything was in his hands again. That's it for today. Give a thumbs up to this video if you found the story interesting, and subscribe to the channel to not miss new episodes. See you soon.